All right, so we have been working with CSS. We've been working with styles, and we've seen how we can create colors, different colors for our fonts. I'll just go ahead and do that so we have it available. Let's just go for a review. Here I have just, I'm going to make a Hawaiian wedding page, and I've got an image. This is a wedding taking place on Waimanalo Beach. I've got a title, and it's not very pretty so far. So let's see what we can do to work with a little bit on these fonts. I've created a link to a styles.css page, which I'm not using yet. I haven't created yet. So let's create a new styles page, file, save as, and we'll call it styles. Remember, you need to save it in the same folder that you're currently working in. This folder also has my image, which is why I'm able to show it. Here's a nice little trick. Sometimes when you're working with files, especially when you're working with styles, and it's an external sheet, it would be nice if I could see these side by side so I don't have to keep flipping back and forth. So remember what the elements are I'm trying to get at. So if you right-click on the title, right-click on styles.css, and choose Move to Other View, now you can see them side by side, which is kind of handy. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is I want to show you how you can center this information into the center of what we're going to call a viewport. And you can think of viewport as the width of your window, but we use the word viewport also when we're talking about, for example, the width of a phone screen or the width of a tablet screen. So viewport then is the width of that, the window in which our page is being displayed. I guess that's the best way to word it. All right, so right off the bat, let's see, my title is in this H1 tag, so I can use my selector H1, and we're going to use this property called text align center semicolon. I'm going to save that. We've been doing run and launch in whatever, keep moving, launch in whichever, but since I've already launched this, all I have to do now is choose save or refresh, and I can see that the heading is definitely centered in my viewport. No matter what the width of my viewport is, that's being centered. My image is not being centered, however, so let's see if I can use that same property, image text align center, save and refresh, and that didn't seem to work. Image is kind of a quirky little deal. We can't center the image by itself, so I'm going to show you a little trick of the trade here. What I can do, though, is put my image in a div and center the div just all in there so you can see it. Now if I, maybe just for clarity, I might put something in here like here is some text. Oh, I'll just put Waimanalo Beach. Waimanalo. Did I spell that right? Yep, beach. Okay, so now if I save it, I can do this save all, saves both of those, and now you can see that it's in fact centering it. This is a good place for a BR or a paragraph tag. A paragraph tag would have also pushed that Waimanalo Beach on a new line. Anyway, just kind of messing around with and this is the way you have to do this. You have to just trial and error because there's never a tried and true way to do things. Okay, so that looks centered. That looks good. Fantastic. All right, but what I'm not liking is the fact that I don't have a lot of control over this text. I don't like this sans serif, as it's called, text. I want to change that to maybe something more Arial. So let's look at W3 Schools and make it bigger so we can see it. And let's do a search on font family. Well, how am I supposed to know font family? Well, if you don't know, you can always come to references and choose CSS reference. And here's, remember, all of these properties that are available to us. And so we could scroll down and ultimately find, hey, font family, that looks like something that might be interesting. So I'm going to choose font family. It gives me some examples of what can be done. Here's some direction that I can either put it in a particular name or in a type like serifs or sans serif, which means with the little ticks on the edge of the, I guess all of these are serifs. Well, you know, like this, sorry. These have ticks on the edge, so this is considered serif, meaning they have those little extra flares. versus sans serif is something like Arial that has just no flare. It's just straight blocky letters. So you can put it either way you want it. Let's say we're going to try this Arial. I'm just going to copy this. Now, why is there 3 different choices? Well, again, I would encourage you to read down and look at all of the different the documentation surrounding this particular property. But to save time, I will just tell you that the browser is going to render it in order that it reads it. In other words, if it can find Times New Roman, if there is a font on the user's browser computer called Times New Roman, that's the font that will be displayed. If not, it's going to look for something called Times, and if it can't find either of those names, then it's going to find the default serif type font and use that. So we don't have any control over what font our users have. We just have to have most computers come with Times New Roman and Arial, so that's pretty much a given. But if we get fancier with fonts, then we might have to give some alternatives to the browser to choose from if those particular fonts aren't found, and we want to have control over what's being displayed. So you could either just put 1 choice or 2 choices. I'm just going to copy all 3, I guess I'll start with font family. Makes my life a little bit easier. So now I'm going to come back into my H1 tag, and let's see, H1, we're going to copy and paste that just so we can see the difference. So now I'm going to save it, and if I come back into my Hawaii, sure enough, Waimanalo is still that serif font, and Hawaiian Weddings has taken on a sans serif font, or the Arial font. Okay, that's great. All right, so what are some of my other choices? Well, we've talked about, let me make this a little bit easier to see. You can line all of these properties out on one line if you want. I'm getting kind of squished for real estate, so there's nothing wrong, and you'll often see many style sheets doing something like this, where each property will be on its own new line. And just to make sure that I've opened and closed my curly braces properly, I'm going to put it on a separate line just so I can see that, yes, H1 starts here and ends here, and all the properties that I want are in between those two. All right, so let's change the color. Let's do something like gray. Let's see what gray comes up with. Remember that you can go to your color picker to choose different colors. All right, that's okay. Okay, so far so good. Let me share one other property with you which can make things look a little bit more professional or fun to play with. So I'm going to come into something called, I'm going to scroll down to text shadow. And as you can guess from the property name, this actually gives us the ability to create a shadow on our text. And if I scroll down and look at, here's my different choices. So I can put more than one value down separated by spaces. So H shadow is the horizontal. How far horizontally do I want my shadow to go? Vertically, how far down do I want my shadow to go? Blur is, do I want a sharp shadow or do I want a blurry shadow? Radius, color. So again, you can go through all of these play it options and look at the different things that are available. You can click on what 2 pixel red would look like, or I can click on that and see. So you got the different choices. Negative is going to put it upwards. So you've got ways to choose what you want it to look like, just to get a good idea of how it works. So what I'll do then is I'm going to put a text shadow then on my H1 tag. That'll be fun. So I'm going to call, let's see, I'm going to do text shadow. I think after experimenting, and I would encourage you to experiment, 2px, this is what I came up with for this particular example. The color, I'm going to put a hex value of red, green, blue. So I'm going to make it blue. It shouldn't look very nice, but the reason I'm doing it is so it'll show up in this video. If I put something a little more subtle, it may not show up. Okay, so that's definitely showing up. All right, that's fantastic. But I think I'm even going to take this a step further. So the last thing I want to show you is that, again, I don't want to put, for example, I might have on my computer a very fancy font that has a real pretty cursive handwriting. And it's going to work great on my computer in this browser. The problem is, again, when we're developing for the internet, I can't be sure that if I have a fancy font that I specially downloaded, that that font is going to be available to everybody computer who happens to look at my web page. So here's an alternative. I feel like Hawaiian Weddings should have something a little more handwriting, more cursive-y, to make it a little bit more elegant. So what you can do is, this is kind of a fun thing. If you go to, I think it's fonts.google.com. What we can do is create a link to Google's fonts. And so we'll have, no matter who has access to our web page, most likely they're going to have access to the internet because they're getting our page from the internet, which means they also have access to Google. And so what, in essence, we can do is create a link. Instead of looking at your own computer, Mr. Browser, go pull the fonts that I have selected from Google's library of fonts and use that to display this header, for example, this H1 tag. And here's how this works. So here's a whole bunch of fonts that are available to me, and that's a lot. I think sometimes you can see this and sometimes you can't, but if you click on this little magnifying glass, you can kind of narrow down your search a little bit. I'm looking for a handwriting. That looks good. Okay, so the next step then is kind of scrolling through here and picking one that you think would be pretty for your site. Excuse me, and I think I kind of like this Great Vibes one, but I'm not sure. So you can also click and type in your own text here to see if you think that's what you would like. And yes, I think that's definitely the one I want. Excuse me. So then what you'll do is, if this is the one you choose, all I'm doing is selecting the font type. So I want to borrow from this Google library, and I can click on select this font. So I can select more than one, but ultimately what will happen is at the bottom of my screen, there's this little bar that'll say one family selected, or two or three or whatever you have. And ultimately what you're going to do then is you need to create a link in the head tag. So we need to copy and paste this and put it in the head tag of our web page. And this is how our browser will know where to go look to pull down a font. And just like we did font family before, we're actually calling now this particular font name, which is what is the font we chose. And because we're linked to Google Fonts, the browser will know where to go get that font style. And so let's see, I'm going to copy this first and we'll put it onto our web page. So we're going to put that in the head of our web page. It doesn't matter if you put it before or after your CSS link, not really an issue there. Okay, make sure I save that. And then I need to get that second part, which is the font family description. So I'm going to copy that. We already had a font family laid out, so I'm going to replace that and make sure I have my semicolon. I do. So now I want to save both of those. So I'm going to do a save all. So I have this one saved and this one saved. And so now, if all goes well, when I run this, that Hawaiian Weddings, that Weddings in Hawaii, this one, Hawaiian Weddings, is going to be replaced with that new Google font that I chose. So, oops, did I just close out that window? I believe I did. So let's do run, launch again. And now you can see that that font has been replaced with the one that it's borrowing from Google. Might need a little bit of adjustment, but then you get the idea how it works. So that is a beginning step anyway to changing our fonts. So we've seen how we can actually use Google's fonts. Ooh, that looks really pretty. We can use Google's fonts. We can do shadows. We can change the color of our text, of our fonts, and also we can change the style of the fonts. So that is fonts.